Bug's Life is a weird movie, not because of its scenes,
I'm finished! Finally, I'm a beautiful butterfly!
but how it fits in the Pixar timeline, where before mid-2010s, the studio made memorable and classic films, with Toy Story being the first to kickstart the chain of creating classics, and then you have Bug's Life, released after Toy Story. A movie that is quite forgettable, especially getting buried by other films that were released throughout the early 2000s. So let's dig a bit deeper why this movie isn't quite as memorable. Essentially, the story is that the ants are collecting a yearly harvest for the grasshopper. However, things didn't go according to plan, with Flick, the protagonist of the film, causing the harvest to fall off the cliff, losing all the food. Hopper, the leader of the grasshopper, is pissed of the harvest being gone and will give them to the end of fall to collect double the portion. So in this crisis, Flick decides to go out and finds bugs to help them fight off the grasshopper. Instead of finding warriors, he finds clowns. After a misunderstanding. However, he tries his best to make the situation work by building a bird to scare off the grasshopper. Eventually, they found out the bugs weren't warriors, creating the lowest part of the film, with our protagonist being exiled for lying to them. Despite this exile, the ants still need his help, with Dot, the young princess, asks him to return since the grasshopper would kill the queen as an example. They make a performance to distract the grasshopper to give them time to set up the bird. It works till Petey Flea, the circus ringleader, burns it for not understanding the situation. Despite this loss, the ants gain the courage and stand up to the grasshopper, with Hopper the leader being eaten by real birds, and happy ever after at the end. So that pretty much gives a quick summary of the film. One of the inspiration of this movie is the tale of the grasshopper and the ant, with the themes of procrastination and being prepared, with the ants collecting food and getting ready for winter while the grasshopper put it off till it was too late. We kinda see that in the film how the grasshopper using ants to collect their food, but it's very loose, since that's where the similarity ends. However, many pointed out that this film is much more closely inspired by the Seven Samurai, with Pixar or Disney not admitting the direct parallels. The beginning scene where the raiders show up to raid the village of the food once the harvest is completed. They send out someone to find people to help them out, with the samurai or circus bugs in this case getting along with the villagers, and a big battle towards the end. Hell, there's a scene where one of the young ants create a mural of one of the bugs dying in the battle for a dramatic purpose. Bug's Life, despite not being a direct comparison, does follow beat for beat to Seven Samurai much more than the grasshopper and the ant, despite Pixar not admitting using Seven Samurai as some of its inspiration of the script and iconic story. It didn't help make the story well remembered other than the connections it might have, because one of the weakest aspects for this film are the characters except for one. Let us start with Flick, how he's generic and also weird, where his motivation is that he wants to make a difference. Oh golly, where I heard that before. This is his main driving force, which remains consistent towards the end. The part that makes him weird is that Flick is established as being an inventor, clever enough to create inventions and ideas, however he's also incompetent. With many of his inventions he uses ends up affecting negatively the people around him, or make the situation worse like the harvest incident. So essentially he is Doofenshmirtz. The reason why I find it weird is because bringing up the Phoenix as a firm villain, usually this type of trait fits better for a bad guy, since it's placed best for comedic purpose. Because whenever Dr. Doofenshmirtz fails, is his incompetence or his inventions not working as properly as he originally planned, either affecting himself or the building he's living in. When it comes to Flick, the characters he's affected are the poor innocent ants who are left cleaning up the mess. I mean, to tell you how truly incompetent he is, that not even manual labor, a punishment for him losing all the food, wouldn't work on him since he could easily screw it up, causing more damage. It's so bad that when Flick essentially accidentally self-exiling himself by searching for warriors, the ants were so happy that there's a chance that he will never return. Not only that, the movie chooses whenever his plans work or doesn't purely out of whim. If the movie explains there's a reason why Flick messes up his invention by a specific flaw that he might have, maybe towards the end he overcomes it, creating a lesson of self-confidence or overcoming that specific flaw. Nope, it's like a switch, it's either on or off. With having a generic motivation, how he's different compared to the other ants, and a flaw not fully explored, Flick is a pretty forgettable protagonist. Circuit bugs are another one that has a similar problem with Flick. How in their introduction we see them all fail to perform their act out of a flaw or screwing it up, causing them to lose their job and mistake Flick as a circus recruiter. However, towards the end, under the pressure surrounded by the grasshopper, they all managed to perform their act perfectly. What changed? Did they gain confidence because of the ants needing help? All they managed to work together in sync by overcoming their flaws. Like Tim, for instance, they established him being soft, but towards the end he gains the confidence. How did he overcome it? Why did he have that flaw in the first place? Many of the characters in the group have this problem, with only a few of the large cast of circus bugs getting any development, like Francis, despite being a dude, many mistake him for being a female since he's a ladybug. With the young ants looking up to him as a mother figure, it learns to get along with them and not be so offended. He's just one of the large cast of bugs that gets any development. Princess Ada is established as being stressed out since she'll be soon taking over the colony once her mother retires, and she feels the overwhelming pressure of managing the colony, which is pretty simple. But towards the middle part of the film, they decide they wanted her to have a relationship with Flick, even though when we see them interact in the beginning, there was no hint of the relationship. Hell, she wanted to get rid of him since he was a nuisance. But I guess Flick, since he's the protagonist, they want him to get the princess, where they tie the words together how Princess Ada is stressed that the colony will think she will fail, tying with Flick how the ants does the same to him, which feels forced, since the reason why Ada will be stressed is the responsibility of the colony's life, that every decision she makes will have an impact on them, either good or bad. So this failing everyone's expectations doesn't seem quite right, making me think it was forcing an idea to make them fall in love, because after this one conversation, we start seeing them have romantic feelings together, even though none of this was present towards the beginning part of the film. Let's talk about the best characters so far. The antagonist, Hopper, easily the best in the film. His presence as voiced by Kevin Spacey absolutely makes him so apart from the others, not just in the design, but the dominance he brings into the room. Every time he's going on a speech, he does a fantastic job of making you want to pay attention and listen to what he has to say, because what he has to say is also well written. His two speeches he had, the first one showing why the ants fear the grasshopper by putting them in their place without so much as lifting a finger to hurt them. The second being the better one, where it's established that the grasshopper doesn't need to go back to get the food since they have enough for winter, and that Harper doesn't really like the food. However, the reason why they need to go back is to make sure to remind the ants who's in charge, because if they let them go unpunished like how Flick stood up to him when he grabbed Dot, but quickly backed down. If they let this slide, the ants will get the inspirations to fight back, because Harper knows they will easily overpower them with their numbers, and he's right. With all of this bullying and dominance, there's a reason behind them to make sure the ants' spirits are broken purely out of principle. This speech here makes Harper more interesting. Despite Harper being the best part with small amount of screen time he still has, something is missing because it's established he doesn't like the food the ants have, and when they do go there, they eat all the food and leave.
They come, they eat, they leave. They come, eat, they leave.
Which brings one question, why is he doing this? Does Harper like having control? It seems to suggest that he enjoys it. It's not very clear what motivates him to do all of this, because they gave him this philosophical speech about dominance, but are not giving him anything other than that, just to assume that he likes it. This is the reason why for me, Harper, despite being good, isn't quite as memorable because there's something missing to push him towards the classic Pixar villain. As for him and the rest of the cast, I'm not expecting overly complicated characters, but something that has meat in the bones like Marley in Finding Nemo, where they established early on why he's cowardly, how a giant creature ate his whole family, leaving his son Nemo being the only survivor, causing Marlin to be overprotective and craven. How his son is taken away, so instead of just saying, well, I lost my son, time to become a woman, he goes after him in great lengths, despite being a coward. Tying to the team of parents who will go to extreme lengths despite their personal flaw to save their children. Personally, there's three factors that make this movie for me memorable, being how incredibly mediocre the film is, despite being right around the corner of Pixar's golden age of writing. Maybe they want to play it safe being a new studio and all, who knows. The other being Harper, despite my small complaint about him, he still offers something interesting despite having a little screen time. And the last thing being Ants from DreamWorks, being released right around the same time as Bugs Life, being a huge middle finger towards it, due to Jeffrey Katzenberg being passed as chairman from Disney, so he and the help of others created an animated studio, DreamWorks, and made himself as chairman with the release of Ants as pure bitterness. I like the pettiness since it makes corporations appear more human. This is also not a good sign since most of what I remember of this film is because of outside reasons. A few things I want to mention that gives me a headache every time I think about, where it's established that Bugs has a society and currency exists. Which brings up a can of worms about how this bug society works with established economy. What does the currency look like in this world? Do they have a job despite having a limited lifespan?
I only got 24 hours to live and I ain't gonna waste it here!
I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't relevant to the plot where P.T. Fleet comes to get his circus bugs to make him rich, revealing the ants they were a fraud. This honestly reminds me of the poorly thought out world of Cars. Also, how did P.T. Fleet manage to enter the island? Did he just teleport it? Since it's established there's no entry other than flying. So Bugs Life, as I said, is a pretty mediocre film from Pixar, Almost all except Harper are incredibly dull and forgettable. The plot I mentioned before, despite its references, is also forgettable. It's just a story about saving the village from danger, which we've seen dozens of times. Not being complemented with an instant group of characters, this movie as a whole is just a big nothing burger, like most of recent Pixar movies. Thanks for watching, and bye.